it's Monday, right? Actually, this weekend was a little busy, but we're in Florida. So Friday morning, flew down and just got back today. And on landing, it's kind of interesting. So you land the main gears, right, of the airplane first, and then you land the front end of the airplane. And so had a burst tire on the front one. So it was interesting. Anyways, so let's jump right into it. So whenever we do these, so I think I posted a video about. I'm sorry. I'm going to post it.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm going to post it. You know, the flat tire on the front one. I had a flat tire year ago, I think, on one of the mains, right? But one of the mains has a flat tire. Means the main tires, the back wheels. So then the airplane goes something like this. But the front one, it just makes noise. I realized it, and so but should be hopefully an easy replacement. Anyways, so we have a bunch of questions. So every single week, 3 times a week, we have a Q&A, and we answer some of the questions that you may have. So let's get started. So the first question, I guess, we'll start with some of the first questions. So the first question is a interesting one, and that is that if I'm buying rental properties, how should I look at my numbers? What is good numbers for a property? What is not good numbers for a property? So it depends on who you are. Right? It depends on what your business plan is. It depends on what your past experience is. If you are doing a turnkey, if you're not doing a turnkey, then your numbers will vary. But I can put out some basic numbers that we look at where if you are full-time in real estate, or if you consider yourself a real estate professional versus if you have some other profession. So first of all, let's look at the property that this person sent in. So currently they own 2 properties, and both of those properties are somewhere in Ohio. I'm not sure exactly where. I think this person has like out-of-town investments, either in Columbus. I'm thinking that's where I didn't read my email correctly, but I believe it was somewhere in Columbus, right? And so when they sent me the question, they're like, well, I have 2 properties, and every single month I get about $300 each on each property. What do you think? I'm like, well, that's not enough information for me to say whether it's good, bad, indifferent. I don't know. Right. So then they sent me the whole analysis. I mean, at least all their numbers. So you tell me what you think, and then I can give you my opinion on it. Right. So this person owns 2 properties. They've owned these properties now for 3 years. Right. So they bought it sometime just before Corona, and now they've owned it. So they feel good about the amount of equity in the properties. And you guys tell me whether this is good, bad, indifferent, and it's a matter of perspective. So between the 2 properties, they have $165,000 invested in 2 properties. $165,000 in 2 properties, and on top of that, they have a loan on these properties. And I'm just treating both of them together because basically they're looking at a combined number. They have a loan on it for another $450,000. So probably about $220,000, $230,000 loan on each. So about $80,000 investment on the 2 properties. So every single month, they get a total of $600 in cash flow. Actually, let me do this. Hey, man, if you don't mind, can you maybe point it that way? Because I think these numbers will make a lot more sense when I show you guys these numbers on here. And do we keep the screen white, or do we?
White.
Okay. All right. So here's their situation, right? $165,000 is what they have invested. This is their investment. So I'll just put it INVEST, invested. That's what they invested. Their loan that they have in addition to it is a $450,000. So this is for 2 houses. I'm going to put 2 over here, right? And then, so this is a loan. Now, in this case, they sent me their numbers in terms of a loan. They have a pretty nice loan on this, right? Their loan on this is a 4.125. So a nice loan in terms of low interest rate compared to obviously where it is today. So this is kind of their situation. Now, every single month they're making, so let me just put, I'll just put it here. Every single month they're making $600, right? So after everything, they make $600. So they're like, Andrew, what is your opinion? Is this good or is this bad? So let's just look at the number. 600 times 12. So 12,336, 12,448, 12,562, 12,672, right? So that's $7,200 for the year. The good part about this is that they are not doing anything in terms of, so they basically, I guess they have come to the 3 day before, and they had kind of followed some advice, which is their agent wanted to do a 1-year lease. And my point to them was, I'm like, and they listened to this part of it, that they did actually a 3-year lease on both the properties, right? So which is great, which I'm very, very happy with. And their 3 years is going to be up sometime in April or so next year, right? So that's a sweet deal. And both the tenants want to renew. Now, here's the great part about it. Because they had done a 3-year lease, they were asking me, they're like, but Andrew, all this time we could have raised the rents and we lost out on that income. But I'm like, guys, if you had turnover in the property, you would have actually made less money. Right? You would not have made more money because you would have turnover in the property. So you would have expense. Your property's vacant for a month or two. So when they did the numbers, they agreed with me that not raising the rents made sense. Now they can do a substantial rent increase without having to do any work. And the tenants will they've already said that, hey, we want to stay. Now, what that's going to do is when they do a rent increase, their bottom line is going to go up. Right? But we're going to look at the performance so far on their property because they've owned it so far. Something I got in my eye. Anyways, so we're going to look at what has happened so far. So 7,200 on 165. So what you have to look at is what is my rate of return, right? What is my rate of return for the money invested? So now this can be looked at 2 or 3 different ways, right? Number one, I looked at, okay, how is their equity in the property? Now, their equity in the property at the time of purchase, they bought these properties as turnkey, right? They did not buy these properties as a fix-up sort of situation. So literally at the time of purchase, they did not have any equity. Now, if we look back, if we look at the property in today's market, they have created about 30% in equity because the market has gone up. And I'm being a bit generous, but I'm just giving them that they have 30% in equity, right, in those properties today. At the time when they bought it, they did not have equity. So is this good? I think it's fantastic, right? They didn't do any work. Now, in a couple of years, now, would I do it this way? No, absolutely not. And I'll explain why. But in their case, this is pretty good. If an average person looks at this, they're like, man, now the properties are worth a lot more, and I'm happy with it. That's just fine. Now, the next thing we look at is how about cash flow? So we're going to come up with a return on investment, right? Yearly return on investment. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then we'll look at, I'm not going to get today into the DCR, but that if you were in Mastery, we would look at what is your DCR, meaning debt coverage ratio, right? So the reason why they're doing this analysis is because they're looking at, well, the way we had talked about the 3-day, what they actually did and what could have been done, which is, what is your time value of money? So let's just say if I take $50,000 and I invested in something. Now, I may have gotten a 5% return, 8% return, 10% return. That always is depending on what else can you do with that money. So if I have money invested somewhere, right, I'm looking at, I want a 40, 50% cash on cash return, 60% cash on cash return. Now, why? Because I'm working in the business or I'm working on the business. It's not a passive investment. Now, once it gets set up, Then when I don't have time into it, at that point, it becomes passive. But early on, right, even for me, even though we have Matt in the office that helps getting all this together, we have Harry in the office that's doing that. There's Miss Sandra. So all the rental portfolio that I have today, that is all passive because I don't have to do anything for it personally at all whatsoever, period, right? All the Airbnbs, when initially they're bought, then they're set up. After they're set up, then they become passive. But it takes 6-8 months for all of that to happen. So in this particular case, this has been passive for them from day one. So that should account for something. So if I look at this as a rate of return wise, right, it'll look something like this, that they invested $165,000, right? On that, they're making $7,200. So what I'm looking for is what is the ratio? So if I do the numbers on that, that's going to be 7,200 times 100 divided by 6, right? So okay. So what that gives me a number of 4.33. So how did I do that, right? So basically that is what is for a $7,200 times 100 divided by 165. So what that means is I have $165,000 invested. So if you do this math, right? So that would be 720,000, right? That's 72 0 and then 00 divided by 165,123. So that'll give me 4.36. So what is their rate of return on money invested? Their rate of return on money invested is a 4.36% return. Now, some people will say, but Andrew, they get tax benefits. They get all of the other stuff. Yes, I agree 100%, right? But on this amount, if they're only making a 4.36% return, think about what the inflation has been in the last year or two, right? So this rate of return is not at all good from that perspective. Now, I understand it's turnkey and all that stuff. Now, you might say, but Andrew, they got a 30% increase in values, right? Now, the increase happened. Did they plan for it? Did they predict that was going to happen? Of course not. But fortunately, they bought this just before Corona, kind of the thing went up, or like right after or during, whenever this was. I don't remember the exact date. But in the meantime, they've gained a bunch of equity because now they have basically the properties are worth about 30% higher, right? So that's a great thing, right? That's not a negative thing. And then their DCR is not the best, but that's not neither here nor there, but we'll just put that aside for today. But if I look at a cash on cash return for them, right, at that point, I'm like, this kind of return is not enough, right? And this is something that you have to think about. Now, when they were sold this sort of bill of goods, right, what an investor had done was an investor had basically bought the property. They had rehabbed the property. They had said, hey, we're going to sell you a turnkey. And then when they're basically selling them a turnkey, the only way the property would cash flow is if they would dump a bunch of money in there. Now, this is what they have been doing for the last 3 years. Now, when they ask me, they're like, well, why do you say, Andrew, that this is not good? We're making $7,200 for the year. I'm like, guys, think about it this way, right? Let me put it differently. I'm like, when you retire, how much would you like to make? They're like, well, if we were making about $10,000 a month, right? We make more than that as both of them are employed, but they're like, in our retirement, we're okay with a little bit less. But if we were making $10,000 a month in terms of rental income, we would be really, really good. I'm like, at a 4.36% rate of return, think about this. How much money would you need to be able to make to be able to basically get the $10,000. I'm like, you would need a heck of a lot of money because a month this thing is only making $600. That's not even $1,000, right? A month. So you would need in excess of 2.5 million, 3 million to be able to get at that 4.36 rate of return. Now, fortunately, today the numbers are going to work out a little bit better. I mean, next year, because their rents are going to be higher. So because their rents are going to be higher, what's happening is they're going to be able to cash flow more. So on both of these properties. Now, was this because they made a wise investment? No. They did something rather than not, so that's a great thing. But then now their cash flow is not going to be $7,200. Now their cash flow every single month is going to be about $200 higher on each property. So now their number is going to look something like this. It's going to be $12,000 for the year approximately, times, well, is that $400? Yeah, it's $12,000 for the year. I wanted to make sure my math was correct. 165, right? So what does that do? So now if I take 12,000 times 1,000, now they'll be getting a 7.27% return, right? After 3 years. So what my point to them was this. I'm like, guys, if you're happy that the prices went up, that's fantastic, right? The problem is that is not investing because you can't control that, right? And if your prices went up by 30%, number one, you could not have controlled that. That's not going to happen all the time, obviously. And the other part of it is what happened in general in terms of inflation, right? We know last 3 years, the inflation, as far as I'm concerned, has been 10, 12, 15%. So if your prices of the properties went up by 30%, right? Whatever the inflation number is, you have to basically divide that. So if your property went up by 30 and the inflation number, they say it's 6, 7, 8%. I don't believe it. I think it's minimum 12 to 15%. I mean, just look at the prices at the grocery store, look at the prices anywhere else, right? So in terms of real dollars, when we're talking about, right, what happened? Everything went up. So what it did was by buying real estate, you kept up with the inflation and you were able to beat the inflation. Why? Because you have low rates locked in. Real estate went up higher than the general market in terms of inflation. So if you look at any country across the world where they have rampant inflation, how do people protect against it? The way people protect against it, and this is across the world, right? The way they protect against it is when they own real estate. Because when you own real estate, what happens is automatically, without you doing anything, you always keep up, if not beat inflation. Because how do people buy property? Well, they have to pay for it, right? And so then the property automatically goes up in relative to the inflation going up, if not even higher. So as far as this part of it, I was like, guys, this is good. But this part of it is rate of return is very, very, very low. So their point was, but Andrew, what do we do? I'm like, well, the question is, number one, why are you asking me this question to begin with, right? And their reason was, they're like, well, we got $165,000 tied up, and now we don't know what to do because we only have 100 left. And if we only have 100 left and we invest that, we realize that at this kind of a return, the numbers are just not big enough, right? The numbers are not, it's not possible for us to be happy with these numbers. So what I said to them was, I'm like, listen, guys, here's my suggestion to you, that depending on how you look at this, my suggestion would be is you should do a 1031 exchange out of those properties. And then you should buy properties, to me, in the Chicago market and just across the board put 20% down, right? They're like, is that even possible? I'm like, it's possible 100%, right? In the Chicago market, we're talking about today, even with the high interest rates, even with the high prices, even with everything, right? Because the realized gain that they're going to have in these properties. They're like, well, but the mortgage, the rate that we have, we're going to lose that rate. I'm like, well, it doesn't matter if you're going to lose the rate, right? Who cares? But what you will have now, if there's somebody that will basically give you your 165 back and buy the property subject to it, go do that, or to go do something else, right? But what makes sense is this, that if they sell their property, they'll have 165 back in their pocket, plus on top of that, right? They're going to have the gain from these two properties, right? And the gain from these two properties, when I calculated it, it's going to be another close to $100,000, right? So when I do the numbers, it's going to be somewhere around 265 that they're going to have to invest, right? I'm like, guys, if you do some simple math, and if you look at the average property today in the Chicago market, because they live in this market, and so if I look at a rate of return, even if they put down 20%, so if they buy a property somewhere around, let's just say 250, 260, something like that, right? Their all-in cost is somewhere over there. Even if they did it the old school way, they didn't do it the Mastery way, they did it the old school way, what would that mean? They would have approximately $50,000 per property invested. Let's just be generous. Let's just say 60, right? So for $260,000 divided by 60, what does that give me? It gives me, gives me 433, right? So they'll be able to buy about 4 properties in the Chicago market. And my point to them was, hey, listen, as long as you're picky and you pick the right properties, right? I would pick basically B plus areas. You can pick up properties with 20% down, right? In those markets even today, right? But you're going to have to put $50,000, $60,000 out of pocket, right? And I think if you're picky and you really understand how to pick it, you may be able to even pick up A area properties. That's what I'm doing. But again, so on 4 properties on an average, right, you're going to be able to, even with today's interest rates, if you do a midterm model, right, like a lot of the midterm models I'm doing, I wouldn't do Airbnb. I would do a midterm model, right? On an average, you should be able to get about $1,000 in net cash flow, about 1,000 net cash flow after expenses, management, utilities, everything, right? So what that does is that means that's about $4,000 in your net for doing a tax-deferred 1031 exchange. So instead of selling the property straight, right, what you do is you do a 1031 out of those properties and then start buying properties in this market, right, in the Chicago market. Why? And why am I saying Chicago versus, say, Florida or some other places? The unique part about Chicago is this. Like yesterday, this was a conversation we were having when I was in Florida, right? Like in Florida, if you go to an area like, let's say, where we were, Punta Gorda or Port Charlotte, what's happening is you have a lot of new inventory that is available. So the Florida market, wherever they can add, because there's more land available, right? Because there's a lot more land available, so there's more inventory available, the amount of demand has gotten like lowered a little bit. Because why? Because the interest rates are high. What's happening in the Chicago market? In the Chicago market, the demand is still there. Why? Because there's no properties available. Now, are there less buyers today than there were, obviously, maybe a year ago? Of course, there are less buyers. Why? Because not as many people are going to qualify. But the problem is this: the inventory that was available has shrunk, hasn't gone up. It has, in fact, shrunk in the Chicago market, right? Because a lot of people who don't have to sell, they're not selling. Why? Because they're like, hey, I have a low interest rate locked in. I'm not going to sell. There's no new construction going on in our market. So actually, when you look at it between Chicago and Florida, guess what's a stronger market today? It's Chicago, right? And Chicago market still, you price the property half fairly. And it's somewhere between A, B, or even C, C plus markets. The properties are gone like that. Why are they selling that quickly? They're selling that quickly because the difference is in a market where you have a lot of new inventory, meaning new construction coming on the market, the builders keep building. So then there's a lot of demand, there's a lot of supply, but yet the relative demand is a little bit weak in Florida. Yet here, the relative demand has not fallen because relatively even less properties are coming on the market, right? See, it's always about supply and demand. That if you have a supply of 1,000 units, but the demand is for 5,000 units, right? So even if the supply further shrinks to 750, yet the demand is still there for 3,000. Guess what happens? The market remains strong. So my point to them is that by coming back to the Chicago market because they live in Chicago, they can get about a 4,000. Now 4,000, that is a month. Times 12, what is that? 12 times 12 is going, sorry, 4 times 12 is going to be 48, right? That's a $48,000 now on 265. So if I did the numbers, right? If you're making $48,000, divide that by 265, that's an 18.11%. Excuse me, this should be a percent. That's an 18.11% rate of return. And because they would end up buying properties in B plus and A areas, right? What's going to end up happening is that they're going to end up basically with some really, really, really good results. See, this is a business plan they can retire on, right? Because if they just do 1 or 2 properties now, save the money that is here, or pay down these properties, and then they can repeat the process. Either way. But this makes a lot of sense because not only are they going to have a lot of cash flow, over time, if they watch how they buy, they're going to have equity and their DCRs are going to come in. So the way they did it, there's nothing wrong with it. Yet they're not going to be able to scale up. The point of investing, their rate of return on these properties is really, really, really low. I give them a lot of credit for at least basically going out there, doing something, now coming back 2 or 3 years later, say, oh my God, I don't know if we did the right thing or not. And guys, you've done the right thing at least because why you got started. You're at least here asking this whole question that, hey, what do you think? Right? Because it's a vulnerable place. We've all done it, right? I've made some investments in my life that I'm like, hey, man, well, isn't now looking back hindsight? Maybe I could have done tweaks differently, but it's hindsight is always 2020, right? That's just how life is. So thank you for asking the question because I think a lot of people will, when they look at these numbers, appreciate, right, what you've, number one, done, and number two, what is possible moving forward. Guys, still, since 2011, Chicago has been the number one market for owning cash flow properties, right? And even today, and I'm saying this to you point blank, it is still a strong, strong, strong market for doing flips, right? The only issue you have to think about is qualification. I'll give you guys a perfect example. So we just put on the weekend, actually, Friday or something, when I was leaving, Harry put the property in Bellwood that I had done a video on the market. Right, and we kind of he put it for about 230, and guess what's happened? Ton of offers have come in, right? And not only at full price, above full price, right? And we're going to go back with a counter which is substantially higher than what the property is listed for. But why? Because in Bellwood, when you look at it, there's no property really that is available that is less than 265. That is a equivalent property in equally good condition, right? So you're able to demand that because there's so many offers coming in on that property that you're like, oh my God, maybe you underpriced it, right? As long as the property sells for a number that is higher than that and the comps are there, which we do see that the comps are there. But guess what? This is a 2-bedroom property that we had bought. Now it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, right? So it's a 3-2, even though one of the bedrooms is going to be, I'm sorry, one of the baths is going to be in the basement, right? So upstairs you have 2 rooms and then you have 1 bedroom upstairs in the attic. But that's just what it is. And Chicago has been a very, very, very strong market, and it's gotten better, right? And it's gotten better, and this is important to understand. It's not just gotten better because I say so. It's gotten better because there is no inventory. That is the reason why the Chicago market has gotten better. Now, if you're doing properties in CC minus areas, then you really have to watch for it. Now, the next question was, how do I buy a pre-foreclosure? Like, what's the best way to make an offer on a pre-foreclosure? So number one, you have to understand what is a pre-foreclosure. So pre-foreclosure is a property, meaning before, right, that has not been foreclosed. Somebody misses a payment, right, 30 days late, then it's 60 days late, then it's 90 days late. At this point, they'll file a lis pendens on the property, which is a lawsuit against the property. And then the bank is trying to basically get the person to do a short sale. They're trying to get the person to do some sort of a settlement debt. They're trying to do a forbearance, whatever it is. If none of that works, right, the property is going to end up at a sheriff sale or a trustee auction, right? That's how it goes. So this period between this time when it goes to the auction and when the court case was filed, which is called a lis pendens, it's a Latin word, that period is called pre-foreclosure, where pre-foreclosure meaning the foreclosure sale has not taken place yet. So at this point, can you do a short sale? 100%. You can do a short sale on the property. And how do you basically, the question is, what is the best way to make an offer? Well, number one, you have to figure out, who am I going to make the offer to? Is it the bank? No, because the bank doesn't own the property. Who owns the property? You make an offer to the homeowner, right? So basically, you're going to talk to the homeowner. That's the person you're going to talk to. Now, how many properties are there that are pre-foreclosures? Right now, as of today, there is 26,000 houses, 26,000 that are pre-foreclosures in the Chicago 5 to 6 county area, right? So between Cook County alone has over 16,000. Think about that, over 16,000, right? And so you would think, oh my God, there are all these properties that are in pre-foreclosures. A bunch of them should be listed on the MLS, right? Guys, there's not even a handful of properties that are listed on the multiple listing service, right? See, whenever a lot of times people get into pre-foreclosure, they're like, oh my God, the problem's going to go away, the problem's going to go away, the problem's going to go away, and they never address it. Why? Because they're scared. They don't want the judgment. They don't know what to do. So what happens is they freeze in place, right? So the way you do this is you pull up the pre-foreclosure list, right? If you don't have the pre-foreclosure list, you're going to the 3-day, then we will provide you the pre-foreclosure list. Otherwise, you pull up the pre-foreclosure list in a specific zip code, right? Which zip codes do you want to target? Like for me, I target the zip code for Berkeley. I target Westchester. I target Hillside. I target certain areas that are relatively close to the office. I target Schaumburg, Lombard, all the areas where I want to own A area properties, right? I just recently added a bunch of places up north where I want to own A area properties. And guess what the goal is? To go after the pre-foreclosure deals, right? And when the deals are not listed in the multiple listing service, who do you talk to? You talk to the homeowner. And the conversation is very simple. Hey, Mr. Homeowner, would you like to be able to save your property? Why we start the conversation there. And just, I want to explain this really transparently. The homeowner is not going to be able to save the property in most cases. Why? Because they can't afford to make a payment. They can delay the inevitable, but they're not going to be able to stop the inevitable. And what's the inevitable? It's going to end up at a sheriff sale. That's the inevitable. If they don't do anything, that's where it's going to end up. They may declare bankruptcy, that's fine. It'll just delay it. They may do something else. They may get a forbearance, they may get a payment plan, but generally 98% of those fail unless the homeowner suddenly goes out and gets a great job. If that happens, that's rare, but if that happens, then they can put it off. But generally, once people get behind, it becomes very cumbersome and very tough for them to financially recover. A lot of times it's better just to settle the debt with the bank, get out of that situation, and then start from a fresh place. Otherwise, it just, even if they get a little bit of money from a relative or something, they just keep repeating the same cycle because they're overwhelmed with the amount of debt that is there on the property, right? So the best way is you can directly talk to the homeowner. You can do a short sale on the property. You can buy the property. So there's a property I'm buying right now. This is a property that is a pre-foreclosure, right? And we're paying the homeowners, the debt on the property is about almost $80,000. On top of that, I'm paying the homeowners about $10,000 additional so that they can walk away from property because the property is in deplorable condition. Outside, excellent condition, right? Almost 90%, 95% there. I just need to clean up some of the landscaping over there. But inside is absolutely in deplorable condition. So a normal person is never going to buy that property. It's got to be somebody like me or you that's a real estate investor. So how do you buy a property out of pre-foreclosure? You directly talk to the homeowner. If they're upside down, meaning if they don't have 50, 55, 60% equity in the property, probably it's going to end up being a short sale, right? If you don't know what's a short sale, you don't know how to process it, call Gina Diaz at Diaz Case Law, right? Diaz, D-I-A-Z, Case, C-A-S-E, Law. Look them up. They're in Berwyn. And we do tons of business with them. And they'll be happy to help you figure it out. They'd love to work with you. They'd love to earn your business. And they'd love to be the future attorneys for you guys as far as investing is concerned. And they understand exactly what we teach, exactly what we do, because we do a ton of deals with them. So the next thing is that if the property is going to auction, you can buy the property before it ends up at auction, right? That's another great way of buying it, but you need to make a deal with the homeowner. Now, if the property is a short sale, you're going to have to get a good attorney. That's why I suggested Gina Diaz's office, and they're going to have to help you do a short sale on the property, right? So that's fine. You can do a short sale. So you make a deal with the homeowner and the conversation goes something like this. Hey, Mr. Homeowner, would you like to get rid of the property rather than it keep affecting your credit? Would you like to resolve this situation? I have an attorney. They will work on your behalf. They're not going to charge you anything. Zero, right? The bank will pay the attorney for all their fees. All their fees are covered by the bank. And all you simply have to do is we can work with you. I can write up a contract and then we'll submit it to the attorney. The attorney will have a conversation with you and they'll submit it to the bank. And then when you walk away from the property, you owe nothing. You owe zero. Even if I'm buying the property, like an example, I just bought a property where I bought the property $140,000. The mortgage balance on the property was $200,000, right? I was not going to pay $200,000 for the property, right? And I was not going to pay that because it's not worth it. In the present condition, the property is not worth it. So I bought it for $140,000. I did about $30,000 in work, and now basically we're going to end up selling the property somewhere around $245,000 to $250,000 is what it's going to sell for. Not a big profit, about $45,000 in profit. Not a whole lot of money, but it's fine. Right? It is what it is. So my point being is that you can make a deal with the homeowner. So if you have pre-foreclosures you're going after, generally you're going to talk to the homeowners. Now, can you buy some of the pre-foreclosures from the MLS? Absolutely. Right? You can absolutely buy a property from the MLS. Then you're going to have to deal with the attorney. When you're dealing with the homeowner, use the purchase and sale contract that we share with you during the 3-day. Right? That's that small 2-page contract. Use that. Do not use a big MLS contract because that is scary for people who are not in this business. So you use the the simple 2-page contract whenever you're doing this. So if you need some help with that, please reach out to us. We're happy to help you with that contract and show up at one of the RIA meetings. Oh, I forgot to mention, tomorrow, there is a networking session. Oh, I dropped it. Okay, so tomorrow there is a networking session, which is the happy hour, September 26th, 6:30. It's in the city at the Old Plank Restaurant, 2700 North Milwaukee. That's again, 2700 North Milwaukee, Old Plank Restaurant. They have parking right next to it. So that's a big convenient thing. I know they just did that last month. It was an epic success. Bunch of people came out because now it's easy place where we have it. We had it at a different location, and it's I'm just doing Blake. Blake and his wife host that, and so it's a great time to go network, grab a beer, grab a sandwich, talk to other fellow investors, learn about what is going on in the Chicago real estate market. So it's a meeting where you can go actually talk. If you're a wholesaler, if you're a person who wants to find cash buyers, that's the place to go show up. Or if you simply want to learn, how do I get started investing? So that's it for today. We will talk to you again on Wednesday. Keep sending in your questions, especially when you have detailed questions like the numbers we were looking at that particular property. That's always fun. I had a bunch more questions today, but we will start addressing those again on Wednesday. Having said that, guys, again, remember, tomorrow happy hour, 6:30 at the Old Plank, 2700 North Milwaukee in Chicago. Show up there. There'll be a bunch of people from Mastery. There'll be Blake will be there. His wife will be there. Miss Jennifer will be there, and we will have a good time. Talk to you guys soon.